Mom, I'm bored. I'm Joseph, and this is Input English. Today I have a story. This story is for comprehensible input. As you probably know, if you can follow this story, follow what is going on and what is being discussed, you will relentlessly absorb the English language. This is the way comprehensible input works, and it works extremely well. It just takes time. Those of us who have used comprehensible input to acquire a second language consider it a sure thing. That is, if we listen to enough understandable content, enough input that we understand, we will learn the language. So I started out with a complaint, Mom, I'm bored. Those words were spoken by Craig, and he was talking to his mother, Kathy. Craig is 12 years old, and he and his brother are at home. It's in the afternoon. They have had their lunch, and it's now in the mid-afternoon. Kathy is a practicing attorney, and in spite of the fact that it's Saturday afternoon, she has been working most of the day in her office at home. She is preparing documents for a court filing that is due in a couple of days. This is a very complex case, and she has delegated a lot of the work to her paralegal. She has a staff member who is doing some of the research work and gathering of information for her, but this part of the work needs to be done by Kathy. This part of the work requires her expertise as an attorney. Kathy would tell you that she's under the gun. That is, she is under some pressure to complete these documents for the filing deadline in a couple of days. Because she has been working so much on this project, she has left the boys to their own devices. When Craig came to her office, he knocked at the door and said, Mom, I'm bored. Kathy was not surprised. She felt some guilt that she had been neglecting her duties as the mom. She has not been paying much attention to her two boys. So when she heard those words, she closed her laptop and faced Craig to engage him in a conversation. She wants to deal with this, and she wants to deal with it very well. There are some other details that will help you understand what is happening here. Robert, that is Craig's dad, is working at the hardware store. It's Saturday, but Craig's dad frequently works on Saturdays. The other important detail that's helpful to understand here is that it has been raining for 3 days. 3 days of rain non-stop. So the boys are cooped up in the house. That is, the usual activities out of doors that they might engage in are prevented by poor weather conditions, or at least that's what it appears. So with that background information, let's see what Kathy does next. When Kathy turned to Craig, she said, "State your case." Now that may sound a little formal for a mother to say to her 12-year-old son, but Craig was used to this. What Kathy was asking him to do is to concisely state the problem. She was giving him an opportunity to fill in some of the details briefly so that she could better understand why he was feeling this way. Craig had expected that prompt and he was ready for it. He pointed out that it has been raining for 3 days. He has already practiced his saxophone for more than 1 hour. There's nothing on television, and he's bored because he can't go outside and do anything. Kathy responded to this with a question. So you want me to solve this problem for you? And Craig just said, yes. Kathy said, instead of that, let me help you solve this problem, because this won't be the last time a problem like this arises in your life. You need to have a strategy on how to respond when you feel like this. Craig didn't really know what she was talking about. He wanted her to entertain him, but she was talking about something else, so he was compelled to listen. She went on with another question. She asked Craig, is he bored? Or is he frustrated? Or is he just uninspired? At this point, Craig didn't really know how to respond. He didn't really understand the distinction she was making. He responded with a shrug. He didn't know. Kathy went on to explain, if you are bored, then your mental capacity is not adequately challenged. You're not doing something that challenges you enough to be enjoyable. That could be at work here. She said, you may be frustrated because the rain prevents you from doing things out of doors that you ordinarily would like to do. Craig nodded in the affirmative. She said, you may also be uninspired because you pointed out that there's nothing on television, but actually there's always something on television. So I interpret the statement, there's nothing on television, as meaning that there's nothing on television that inspires you. There's nothing that interests you. Craig again nodded in the affirmative. Kathy said, well, this is not going to be the last time this problem shows up and you're going to have to deal with it. So let's work on some ideas. She started by asking Craig what would be some bad ideas. Craig just said, doing something boring. And she said, not exactly what I was looking for. What I'm looking for in a bad idea would be something harmful, something that is maladaptive, something that is bad for you. Craig wasn't really clear what she was talking about until she gave some examples. You could go look for candy or sweets. You could eat a bunch of junk food. Some people might go online and treat their boredom with scrolling on social media. Most of us consider that harmful if it's done to excess. Now Craig understood what she was driving at. One of the things that people should do when they are in this situation is look at their basic assumptions. It may be time to think out of the box. When you think out of the box, you look at the situation from a less conventional point of view. You look at it without subscribing heavily to the assumptions that have contributed to the problem. Again, Craig was trying to understand what she was talking about. She could read that in his facial expression, so she explained. You assume because it is raining that you can't go outside and enjoy yourself. But indeed, you can go outside. It just requires a raincoat. Kathy said, so let's come up with a plan how you can address this problem. I want you to do 3 things. First, I'd like you to look outside and check to see if there is any lightning and thunder. I haven't heard any, but you could take a look. Just make sure that lightning is not striking anywhere near us. Craig understood, so she moved on to the second point. Next, I want you to go out and check on Oscar. He's in the laundry room. See what he is doing, and then while you're there, let him outside because he's been cooped up in the laundry room for hours. He probably needs to do his business. Now, when Kathy said that Oscar needs to do his business, she's talking about eliminating waste, because higher animal forms like dogs and people produce waste products, and they need to get rid of them. In English, we have a lot of words that we use to describe the discharge of bodily waste products. Some of them are polite, other terms are very scientific, and some of these terms one would not say in polite company. They're considered dirty words. Talking about a dog doing his business means the dog needs to either urinate or defecate. That is, he needs to either produce water or solid waste. Also in English, sometimes we simplify this terminology to number one to signify urination, and number two to indicate defecation. All of these terms are polite. Now, because of the nature of this channel, I'm not going to get into the impolite terminology for these processes. That information is readily available to you using the internet, but it's not the purpose of the Input English channel to teach that kind of input. I'm not being overly pious on this, I'm just being practical. This channel is for all audiences, and I strive to offend no one. So in our story, Craig was instructed to let Oscar, the dog, out into the yard briefly because it's raining, so that Oscar can eliminate some waste. He may need to urinate, for instance. Craig understood the instruction and nodded. Kathy said, "Next, I want you to go upstairs and check on Bobby. I think he's in his room. He may be drawing. Don't disturb him. Just quietly take a peek and see what Bobby is doing." With that, Kathy said, "Got it?" And Craig answered in the affirmative, "Got it." Craig did all three of those tasks and then returned to Kathy's office and again knocked at the door. Again, she closed her laptop and faced him. She asked, "What did you find?" He said, "Well, there's no lightning. I didn't see any at all. I let Oscar out and he did his business. And then I checked on Bobby and he is drawing pictures. He is seated at his desk and he is concentrating on drawing a picture." Kathy said, "Very good. Come with me." They went out to the hall closet and she pulled two raincoats out of the closet. She handed Craig his raincoat and then she put on her raincoat. They put on rain hats and they were ready to go outside. She turned to Craig and said, "Well, now we're going to do what you can't do. That is, we're going to go out in the rain and we're going to have a good time in the backyard." She continued by saying, "If it wasn't so cold, we could go out in our bathing suits, but it's too cold for that. So that's why I chose the raincoats. So let's go." With that, Kathy called up the stairway to Bobby and told Bobby that she and Craig would be in the backyard. Bobby responded, "Okay." And with that, Craig and his mom departed for the backyard. It was raining pretty hard. They walked around the yard looking for interesting things. Kathy wanted to make this visit to the backyard during a rainstorm interesting. It didn't take her long to find a lot of mushrooms in the grass. It has been raining for 3 days, so it's natural that mushrooms would be coming up in the grass. There were many different kinds of mushrooms, and they examined them closely. Kathy used a stick to disturb some of the leaf litter in one of the flower beds, and she found a lot of things wiggling and crawling. There was a centipede, that is a flat worm with a lot of segments and a lot of legs, and it scurried for cover. There was an earthworm, and it also attempted to escape by finding cover. A little more poking at the leaf litter, she found a beetle. It responded much the same way. It tried to find cover. On one of the trees, she pointed out a frog. There was a tree frog. They stayed in the yard for probably about 30 minutes, and Craig was surprised how enjoyable it was. He was properly dressed in a raincoat with a rain hat, so he was not getting wet. He was warm, and he saw some things that looked a little different in this environment. After about 30 minutes, Kathy figured that it was time to go in. They went back into the house and took off their wet rain gear. They hung it so that it would dry. While they were doing that, Kathy asked Craig if that allowed him to realize that he was not necessarily cooped up in the house. It was just raining, and he indeed could go outside if he wanted to. Craig nodded. With that, they went back to Kathy's office, and she suggested that Craig take a seat near her on a box full of files. It was a proper height for a 12-year-old boy to sit upon as a stool. Kathy summarized what they had done thus far by saying that they had discovered that really he wasn't cooped up in the house except for by his assumptions. Craig nodded. At that point, Kathy asked, "When you checked on Oscar before you let him out of the laundry room, what was he doing?" Craig said that Oscar was taking a nap. Kathy then pointed out that she was not surprised because that was Oscar's habit in the afternoon to take a nap. So taking a nap is an option if you're bored. It's a possibility. And Craig didn't find that very satisfying. He didn't really want to take a nap. He wanted to do something fun and interesting. Kathy moved on to what Bobby was doing. She said, "So Bobby was drawing a picture." Craig nodded. She asked, "Did he look like he was enjoying himself, or did he look like he was bored?" Craig said that Bobby looked like he was really enjoying himself. He was really focused on drawing the picture. Kathy explained that that's what she expected. She has seen him in that situation. She explained to Craig that she considers Bobby to be in a flow state when he is drawing a picture. He is fully engaged in the process. It is stimulating. He enjoys it, and he doesn't sense the passage of time. He can draw pictures for hours and not get bored. He finds it easy to draw these pictures and very enjoyable. I think he's in a flow state. Craig nodded. Kathy summarized. After all of this, it appears that you were bored. You may have been a little frustrated by all the rain. Also, you may have been frustrated by the fact that I'm working here in the office doing all this work for this case that I've got to finish. You may have found that frustrating. But we discovered that you actually could go out in the yard and overcome that frustration, at least for a while. We can also conclude that you were not inspired by what's on television. You didn't find it very inviting, and that's probably a good thing. Watching most of the television shows available, scrolling for hours on the internet, and eating lots of sweets are really different forms of junk food. And you didn't try to do any of that, and that's great. So what remains is the idea of finding something that you find interesting and challenging something that would engage you intellectually, that would be very satisfying. Something like what Bobby is doing when he's drawing these pictures. To himself, Craig thought, right, that's what I want. Kathy said, well, for me, the best option for that kind of activity on a rainy day where one is not likely to go out of doors for long periods of time is to read a book. We have a lot of books in the house, and maybe you and I should go look at some of the books and help you select one that you will find interesting and stimulating, something that you will be interested in reading rather than just being bored. Now, this resulted in a big smile on Craig's face. He felt a little embarrassed because he had not thought of this. He had simply not thought of reading a book. But indeed, they do have interesting books. And there are many books in the house that he can read that would be very interesting. With that, they walked over to the living room and looked in the bookshelf. She pulled out several books, which Craig had already read. She pointed out that he could read them again, but there's probably something in the bookshelf that he has not yet read. They kept looking, and then she selected a volume entitled The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. She figured that Craig had read that, so she speculated to him. She said, I suppose you've already read Huck Finn. Craig said, no, I've read Tom Sawyer, but not Huck Finn. She handed the book to Craig. She said, I am certain you will like this book. With that, Craig took the book, smiled broadly, said thanks, and walked over to his dad's chair. He climbed into the chair and opened the book. Kathy was satisfied that she had addressed this problem and had helped Craig to understand it a little better. So she went back to her office to get back into that nagging report that's due in 2 days. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.